The sound of something falling behind me made my hands freeze around the wrench. I turned quickly in the dim basement light, expecting to see a broken pipe or a collapsing shelf. Instead, I saw my elderly neighbor standing at the bottom of the stairs, her frail fingers clutching the railing, tears shining in her eyes. She looked at me for a long moment before asking a question so unexpected, so painfully human, that it changed my life forever. Before we continue, if you believe kindness still matters and that people deserve second chances, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to A Journey of Hearts. Your support helps these stories reach people who may be carrying silent burdens. Most people in our neighborhood knew me as the man who fixed things. Broken sinks, leaking roofs, damaged fences, old heaters that refused to work in winter. I wasn't a licensed contractor or an engineer. I simply learned over the years because life demanded it from me. At 46 years old, I carried more regrets than accomplishments. 3 years earlier, my marriage had ended quietly, without shouting, without betrayal, without dramatic scenes. It simply dissolved under the weight of grief. My wife and I had lost our daughter in a car accident caused by a drunk driver. She was 16 years old and had loved painting sunsets more than anything else in the world. After her death, our house became unbearably silent. Every room reminded us of someone who would never come home again. My wife buried herself in work, while I stopped caring about almost everything. Eventually, she packed her belongings and moved across the country to live near her sister. She said she couldn't heal while watching me disappear a little more each day. Maybe she was right. I sold our family home and rented a small place in a quiet neighborhood where nobody knew my story. I worked odd jobs repairing appliances and doing maintenance work for anyone who needed help. It wasn't a dream career, but it kept my hands busy and prevented my mind from wandering into dark places. That was how I met my neighbor, 78-year-old Maribel Hawthorne. She lived alone in the old blue house next door. Her husband had passed away 7 years earlier, and she had no visitors except a mail carrier who occasionally helped bring packages inside. Maribel was the kind of person who still baked bread from scratch and waved at every passing car. She wore cardigans even during warm afternoons and had a laugh that reminded people of wind chimes moving in a gentle breeze. At first, we only exchanged greetings. Then one rainy morning, she knocked on my door and asked if I could look at her washing machine because water was leaking across her basement floor. I agreed without hesitation. The basement was filled with memories. Boxes labeled with dates stretched along the walls. Christmas decorations sat beside dusty photo albums. Old furniture covered with white sheets resembled sleeping ghosts. A workbench occupied one corner, still neatly arranged as though someone had used it yesterday. Maribel explained that it had belonged to her husband, who loved building birdhouses. As I repaired the washing machine hose, she spoke softly about her life. She had raised 2 children. A son named Vincent. A daughter named Clarissa. Both had moved away decades ago. Vincent lived overseas. Clarissa was somewhere in another state. Maribel rarely heard from either of them. She said it without bitterness. Just sadness. Like someone describing the weather after accepting there was no way to stop the rain. After that day, helping her became part of my routine. I fixed squeaky doors. Changed light bulbs. Trimmed hedges. Carried groceries. Sometimes she baked apple pies and left slices on my doorstep. Sometimes I helped her organize old boxes in the basement. Neither of us talked much about loneliness. We didn't need to. Loneliness recognizes itself in others. Months passed. One bright spring afternoon, Maribel called and said her basement lights had stopped working. I grabbed my toolbox and headed over. Sunlight streamed through small basement windows, casting golden rectangles across the concrete floor. I climbed a ladder and checked the electrical wiring. The problem turned out to be a damaged circuit breaker. Simple enough. I replaced it and tested the switches. The lights flickered back to life. As I packed away my tools, something slipped from a shelf and landed nearby. It was an old photograph. I picked it up carefully. A younger Maribel stood smiling beside her husband. Between them were two children holding handmade kites. They looked genuinely happy. The kind of happiness people don't realize is precious until years later. Maribel slowly walked toward me and took the picture in trembling hands. For a long moment, she stared at it. Then she looked at me. And asked that question. Would you miss anyone if you disappeared tomorrow? The word struck harder than any punch. Nobody had ever asked me something like that. Not directly. Not honestly. I opened my mouth to answer but couldn't. Because the truth frightened me. My ex-wife might hear about it eventually. A few former clients might wonder why I stopped answering calls. But miss me? Need me? Wait for me? I wasn't sure anyone would. Maribel nodded gently, as though my silence had already given her the answer. Then she whispered that she had been wondering the same thing about herself. She admitted that she sometimes sat in her living room for hours imagining what would happen if she simply never woke up. Would anyone notice quickly? Would her children come? Would neighbors attend her funeral? Or would strangers pack her belongings into boxes while her family argued over inheritance? Her voice cracked. She apologized for asking such a heavy question. But she said carrying those thoughts alone had become exhausting. I sat down on an old wooden chair. For the first time in years, I told someone everything. I spoke about my daughter. About losing my marriage. About waking up every morning feeling as though I had already lived the best part of my life. I admitted that helping people fix broken things was easier than repairing myself. Maribel listened without interrupting. She never offered advice. She never said everything happens for a reason. She simply listened. Sometimes listening is the greatest gift one human being can offer another. That afternoon changed something between us. We became more than neighbors. We became companions in grief. Every Sunday, we shared lunch. She told me stories about her childhood. About dancing barefoot at county fairs. About meeting her husband during a thunderstorm. About spending 48 years with someone who always warmed her hands before bed because she hated cold fingers. I found myself laughing again. Really laughing. Not the polite smile I forced around customers. But genuine laughter that left tears in my eyes. For the first time since losing my daughter, I felt alive. Then one evening, everything changed again. Maribel didn't open her curtains. She didn't collect her newspaper. Her porch light remained on all day. Worried, I knocked repeatedly. No answer. Using the spare key she had once entrusted to me, I entered carefully. I found her sitting in an armchair. Awake. But weak. She had a fever and struggled to stand. Doctors later confirmed pneumonia. She spent 12 days in the hospital. During that time, I visited every day. I brought flowers. Magazines. Homemade soup. One afternoon, I asked whether her children knew she was hospitalized. She lowered her eyes. She had called both. Neither answered. Clarissa sent a text message saying she was busy. Vincent promised to visit when work allowed. Neither came. I watched disappointment settle across her face like a shadow. She tried pretending it didn't hurt. But parents never stop hoping their children will choose them. Even after years of silence. Even after countless disappointments. When she returned home, she seemed smaller somehow. More fragile. As if illness had stolen pieces of her spirit. One afternoon, while sorting old papers in the basement, I discovered dozens of letters. Every birthday card. Every Christmas note. Every school drawing her children had ever given her. She had saved everything. Even a crayon picture labeled, "Best Mommy Ever." Suddenly I understood. Maribel wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of being forgotten. A week later, I made a decision. I created a neighborhood gathering. Nothing fancy. Just coffee, cookies, and conversation every Saturday afternoon. At first only 3 people attended. Then 6. Then 10. Retired couples. Single parents. Teenagers. Widowers. People carrying invisible loneliness. Maribel sat proudly in the center, serving tea and sharing stories. Her laughter returned. Soon neighbors began checking on one another regularly. Birthdays were celebrated. Meals were shared. Gardens were planted together. People exchanged phone numbers. The neighborhood slowly transformed into something rare. A community. Months later, Maribel received an unexpected visitor. Clarissa. Her daughter stood awkwardly at the front door. Gray streaks touched her hair. Regret filled her expression. Apparently, she had seen photographs online from neighborhood gatherings. She noticed her mother smiling. Really smiling. Happier than she had looked in years. Clarissa realized she had allowed work, obligations, and pride to steal precious time. She apologized. Not perfectly. Not eloquently. But sincerely. Maribel embraced her without hesitation. Because mothers often forgive long before apologies arrive. Their relationship wasn't magically repaired overnight. Healing never works that way. But phone calls became weekly. Visits became monthly. Small bridges replaced years of distance. One evening, nearly a year after that question in the basement, Maribel invited everyone to her backyard. Strings of lights glowed overhead. Children chased fireflies. Music played softly. People shared food and memories. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Maribel stood and raised a glass. She thanked everyone for giving her something she thought she had lost forever. Purpose. Belonging. Family. Then she looked directly at me. She said that sometimes angels don't arrive with wings. Sometimes they arrive carrying a toolbox. I felt tears slide down my face. Because she was wrong. I hadn't saved her. She had saved me. She reminded me that pain doesn't disappear. But it can become lighter when shared. She taught me that even broken hearts can still shelter others. And she answered a question I had been avoiding for years. Would anyone miss me if I disappeared tomorrow? Yes. People would. Because being needed isn't about fame. Or wealth. Or grand achievements. Sometimes it simply means showing up when someone feels invisible. Holding a ladder. Fixing a light. Listening without judgment. Staying when everyone else leaves. Maribel passed away peacefully 2 years later. She was 81. Her funeral overflowed with neighbors. Friends. Children. Families. People whose lives she had touched with kindness. Clarissa cried while reading a letter her mother had written months earlier. In it, Maribel said she no longer feared being forgotten. Because she had finally found her way home. And I realized something beautiful. Home isn't always a place. Sometimes home is a person who asks the question nobody else dares to ask. Sometimes home is a basement filled with old memories. Sometimes home is discovering that even after tremendous loss, your heart still has room to love again. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share it with someone who may feel alone, and subscribe to A Journey of Hearts so more people can hear stories that remind us we are never truly invisible. Special request, please comment below with the words, kindness still lives. If you believe a small act of compassion can change someone's entire world, and tonight, before you go to sleep, think about someone who may be wondering if anyone would miss them tomorrow. Send them a message. Make a phone call. Knock on their door. Because sometimes the greatest gift we can offer another soul is not money, advice, or solutions. It is simply reminding them that their existence matters. And perhaps, somewhere nearby, there is another lonely heart waiting in a quiet basement, hoping someone will stay long enough to listen.